T-cell lymphoma not that long ago. Was on heavy regimen of chemotherapy and things like that. To balance that, I had to take heavy doses of prednisone, which is a steroid, to protect my heart, I think, from the poison that was being pumped into my body to save my life. And it was the first time, because at least I'd like to think that I have a rather healthy psychological disposition. And it was the first time in my life that I experienced a chemical feeling of, it was the first time that I came face to face with, there's a lot of chemistry here.
Yeah.
There's quite a bit of why do I feel prednisone has this capacity to make you feel, first of all, like very get up and like just do everything and anything. It's like it's a steroid. It's right. But also very easily agitated. Now, in case you couldn't guess,
which is not you at all,
right? So I didn't know what to do with myself, because it's like, why am I so angry? But I'm not. Like, I wasn't yelling at anyone. I was like, but why do I feel,
chemicals?
So you could say, I feel like I'm sick, and I'm, I think it's one of the stages of, anger, but it wasn't. It would like, I would take the prednisone. It would be like 2 days, and then, you reset until you can go for the next round of, and it would go away. And then like prednisone, and it took me like 2 or 3 times, like, oh, it's the prednisone. I was like, is that like a normal symptom? And the oncology nurse would be like, yeah, that's pretty normal. So being a philosopher, being a lover of wisdom, and like trying to, I was like, well, that's interesting. I never thought of myself in this chemical way before. Now, for some people, that would be like, I guess I'm just all chemicals. I had the exact opposite feeling. That was, whoa, I'm like so much more than look how these chemicals can kind of like come and change my mood or my behavior in these ways. But it didn't. I'm still like, I was more than that the whole time. Right. It was almost like trying to call my bluff. It was like, like for the podcast you're listening to, and it's like, well, once the brain isn't working, so then you're just worm food. Well, so if someone's blind, so now one of their 5 senses is knocked out completely. So they're less them, meaning the brain going is the same thing as like all our 5 senses are gone. So we wouldn't say that like that's 4/5 of a person.
Right.
A
person's still a whole person.
You lose a limb. And it's funny because when that happens, at least for me, this is what happened. Everything that I had been living for 33 years went out the window in terms of, well, I wasn't living that for 33 years, but certainly the past 10 years or so, where I was living in Israel, we had to go to America, not because there wasn't amazing medicine here. In fact, the doctor who's taking care of like all the post stuff, which is just monitoring, when I mentioned his name in America to the doctor who was taking care of me, and she was like, oh, he's like the expert. So the medicine here is quite good, but it was more like being near my family. Like I said, I don't have any family here, and kind of
just logistics
having my wife have to take care of everything would have been
nightmare. Yeah.
Yeah. So, geography gone. Hi, I'm, Dovid'l Weinberg. Who are you? Well, I live in Jerusalem and I teach in the old city, and here's what I look like, and here's how I feel, and this is what I love doing. These are the things I like to eat. I mean, I would never. No one would introduce themselves, but in your own head, it's like these are a lot of the things. This is what I like to do. This is what I.
Right.
That's how you know yourself and think of yourself. And then it's like, well, all your hair is gone, your beard is gone, your job is not gone. Like you didn't lose your job, but you're not doing it. Right. You're not living where you're living. So like on the one hand, it's like, whoa, I mean, any one of those things alone, is enough to offset some sort of major crisis. And having all of them happen at the same time, it's like, I remember having this moment where I like looked in the mirror in New Jersey, like far away from Jerusalem, not looking or doing the things that I was used to doing. Probably one of the days when my wife says it was like I was pregnant, you know, like things smell funny, taste funny. It's like that. It's closest a man can ever feel what pregnancy feels like.
Stuff going on that was just like beyond.
Yeah, all this chemical stuff, you know, all these hormonal chemical things. And like looking in the mirror and then like laughing and being like, but I'm still like anything you would have thought would be, this is who you are, which are all the physical things, both in terms of the senses, you know, going and physical appearance and trappings of what it means to be in a body were gone. And all that was left was like, oh, like the soul is totally still exactly what it was before.
Right. And rocking, like, meaning it was the most powerful thing that you felt that you were, I imagine.
Well, it was interesting because, you know, you're in a relationship with Hashem. And then it's like, I mean, anybody who's listening to this podcast and is hearing the way that we grew up, I mean, how fortunate, how lucky could a person be, you know? And at the time that we're living in, and all of it is, and I'm deeply aware of that, and try to share everything that I possibly can, whether it's financial or things that I've picked up along the way, to try to just pass that along as much as I can, because I feel so fortunate. Why wouldn't I want to share anything that I can?
You mean connected to the sickness?
The first 33 years of my life.
Oh, I see. Right.
And so you can imagine a person kind of growing up in this really fortunate scenario, and then all of a sudden it's like
yanked.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, renting a house in Jerusalem and one in New Jersey.
Yeah,
and not earning a salary, and your wife and children having to transfer to different schools, where in Israel the schools are taken care of, but in America you have to pay for schools. So like that's the financial piece.
Yeah, flip script. Everything.
And so
the first question that most people would ask, and I'm sure they have if they've had I'm not sure if it's bravery, but it's not bravery, but it's just, it's intrusive, is, okay, Dovid'l, so this Hashem and cancer. Yeah. Okay. So for the first 33 years, or for the time where you really started getting in touch with Hashem on a more adult, so you're like, I love Hashem. Relationships booming. Mm-hmm. We dance around in meadows together. He's got his arm around me, and look at me in Jerusalem, and I know Torah, and you're just living your dream, and you're feeling it. And then this Hashem, and not a person, delivers to you this. And what did you think of your relationship with Hashem? And then I'll jump in afterwards, and I've said to you this, how I felt you were handling it from far away. But what did you, because I've never asked you this, what did you think, what did Hashem do to you? And what did you think about that?
I think there was a subtle, I mean, it wasn't like I woke up one day and it was like that. There were a lot of stages to it.
But you were sick.
I was sick. I was even sick the year before. I got like strep throat 5 times, which is, I'm generally a rather healthy person. Like the winter before, I was diagnosed. So either my body was like fighting something else and therefore couldn't take care of the strep, or having strep so many times was what set it off. Or
I remember you had strep the year before.
A bunch of times.
I remember.
A bunch of times. So either my body was weakened by the strep and then developed an autoimmune disease, or the autoimmune disease was already underway and my body was focusing on that. Either way. So there was like, a process of not feeling well. I don't know. I remember sitting with a friend at a certain point and him asking if I had, b'mechilat, the prednisone, with all due respect to the prednisone, asking if I felt angry or, and I said, no, I don't feel angry. And he challenged me and he said, well, why don't you feel angry? And I said, because everything's going to be fine, and there's some discomfort, but, and this is a disposition thing, this is like, maybe it's a choice, maybe it's a little bit in nature. I was constantly looking for, well, okay, what can I do with this?
Meaning what, from a spiritual point of view, or
from a spiritual point of view? The type of things that I've studied, I think I was well prepared for it. The lifestyle that I was living, my belief. Well, it's like you're in a relationship with somebody, and then like it starts, something hurts you in the relationship. That doesn't mean that that person isn't there. In some ways, they're there more, So the idea that, well, he did this to you, so therefore he doesn't exist. Like he doesn't exist because you're upset. So there was definitely a healthy sense of what I don't know what's going on here. I think that was probably more the feeling like I have no idea what this is. I'm pretty confident that this is gonna be okay, and was totally prepared for okay being I don't make it through this, but like more beyond me. Like this is gonna be okay. This is not gonna make or break the project.
Which project? Because your wife and kids, if they could choose, would say, no, you got to make it.
For sure. And I did everything that I could too, and I'm happy that I did and followed the instructions pretty to the T, and did what I could. But there was no sense that, things much more tragic than that have happened in this dance. Shir Shirim's filled with all these disappointments.
Right.
Also, going back to that book. And the Bible is filled with disappointments, both in terms of what a human being is requesting of God, of Hashem, and what Hashem is saying back to them. And so there's a quite a bit of trust, going back to that Nasiv and Ishma. Not to get too heavy into sources, but one of the first things that happens with the Jewish people and Hashem, which is as we're leaving Egypt, this is like introduction to our relationship on a national level, not just as individuals, is so backwards. The whole concept of leaving Egypt and the Bible speaks about putting blood on the inside of the doorposts,
right,
so that God will jump over So there is one tradition that just kind of is like, blood on the doorposts, really? It's like, we weren't the first to be like, that's kind of weird. It's not like they were doing it like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. And the response is, well, first of all, what's the point of the blood on the doorposts? You tell me.
Well, in terms of mezuzah.
No. Why were we instructed to put blood on the doorposts? It was in the middle of the final of the 10 plagues.
So that he would pass over.
Right.
He would. It was an identifier, a sign.
Right. So put it on the inside or on the outside if it's an identifier.
Put it on the outside.
Right. So on the inside, we were told to put it on the inside, not the outside. And
right.
We're talking about who again is going to identify?
We're talking about the one that doesn't need to see.
Right. So, exactly. So it's like, it's 2020. Like, we're not the first people to notice that. Like, the first people who notice it were the first people who were instructed to do that. It's like, well, this is kind of odd. And so Rabbi Yosef Cairo, who was a mystic living in Tzfat, who was also a great lawyer who wrote the Code of Jewish Law.
Right.
He was simultaneously both, which is fantastic. Right?
Yeah.
He wrote the Code of Jewish Law. He was also a tremendous mystic. So
not many lawyers out there like that.
No.
We need more. We need more.
Yeah. So he writes that the very inception of the national relationship between the Jewish people and Hashem is like, this is going to be bloody, and you're not going to understand it because, like, I should know what's going on anyway. Wow.
So you're saying it's not for me to see the blood; it's for you to see the blood. And then I'm going to say, from like you're saying, that Hashem's saying, listen, you're not gonna know half the time or most of the time what the hell's going on.
Right.
But come with me.
Yeah, and on the outside, everything's clean. Outside there's no blood.
Right.
So why? But why? Like, couldn't it have just been?
Yeah. Couldn't it have just been
less
simpler?
Couldn't we just hang flowers on the inside?
Right.
Wouldn't that be?
Because after all, you love us, right, Hashem?
Right.
You love us, right?
Right.
And you want us to love you back.
Right. So
make it all lovable.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to Jung for a second, who's like major, his like slogan. It was in Latin, I think, that he said it, but I don't.
I did Latin.
I don't pretend to know things I don't know.
Caecilius es in cana. Caecilius is in the kitchen. That's it.
I was about to say, like, what did you just say?
That's it. That's all I remember from Latin.
Yeah.
And I did it for 12 years. Yeah. I wish I'd have paid more attention. Might have served me.
It's not a living language.
I'm very aware.
But then again, people would have said that Hebrew wasn't a while ago, but it came back pretty strong.
Right.
Although we did have some guarantees of that happening. Anyway, he said, in filth it shall be found. Now, it probably sounds super cool in Latin, but I don't think most of your listeners are native.
No.
Yeah, in filth it shall be found. And this is not just a Jungian idea. I think this is like what all psychology is predicated on. It's like, if you're afraid of something, you need to expose yourself to it. And so part of life, and I think this is and I knew this before. This was not like I came up with, I knew this and lived this. And so when a very difficult period struck, it was like, oh, like I know the maneuver to do now, I know.
Wow.
And so it was rather clear that in filth it shall be found. Now, what is filth, and what does it mean what are you finding? It doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter what it's in X, there will be Y, and the X is really not so great. And the Y, in blood, right, there will be redemption.
Right.
In lymphoma, there will be lots of things, and I could share with you some of the things that I took out of that, including being a better teacher, father, husband, more empathetic person. Got to write a book while I was sick. Know myself a lot better. Had those experiences where I was able to look at myself and say, well, who are you? What am I? It came with a lot of pain. And for me, a lot of the hardest part of it was because I was going through it, and because we all have this weird sense of being invincible, even though as we get older, it kind of fades. I think it was much harder probably for my wife and for my brothers and for my parents and for my friends and for my students than it was for me, because the whole time I was there, I was like, this is fine. It's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And I'm learning things, and I'm uncomfortable. It wasn't like I'm not delusional. It wasn't like, this is great. I like this. It was like, I don't like this. But the resistance, this filth, is an opportunity to find. It's an opportunity. And it's an opportunity that you don't look for, but finds every single person. It's part of being a human being. It's coming face to face with the fact that you're limited. I think that my creative output since getting sick is like much more consistent, probably because it's like, well, you better do this.
Because you never know.
Right. So there are so many different things that I was able to take from it. We have a strong tradition in our people, going back to the very beginning, that adversity is, by Avram Avinu, by Abraham, one of the most famous things about him is that he was always being tested, the 10 tests of Abraham. And it is not accidental that the word for a test in our tradition, nisayon, comes from a phonetically similar root as to be raised up, right? Like a flag. Because it's an opportunity. I mean, it can crush you, or you can ride it, and you don't ride it alone either. It's like, well, yeah, this is really not great for me right now, but the world is incredible. So you don't get to say, well, there's something dark right now, which, by the way, is like a birthing process. At least that's how we view it in our tradition. All darkness is a birthing pain. At the same time,
a liberation, a moment of potential liberation.
Well, it's going back to what I was saying before. It's a death and rebirth. So it's like anytime there's some resistance, whether it's a small minor thing in the Talmud, reaching your hand into your pocket and pulling out the wrong coin. You're looking for a quarter, and you pull out a nickel, or you're looking for a shekel, and you pull out a 10 shekel piece. Is pause for, is a death and a rebirth. This didn't go. So, you're
saying that in that moment you're like, oh, disappointment.
And if you boil it down, theologically, that's as troubling or as not troubling as being sick in a wildly painful way. It's like either you're expecting the world to be just always go exactly the way that you want it to, or you recognize that you have no idea what's going on and you're in a relationship with someone who knows a lot more. And most people would react to that though and say, sure. Well,
I'd rather take the 10 shekel challenge.
Well, of course. Well, okay. So there are degrees, but if you boil it down,
the pattern
philosophically,
the pattern is the same.
It's like either the world should be perfect because God is nice, right? Or you agree that there are things that there's more to the world than just you're getting what you want all the time.
That's hard for this generation.
Yes.
That's really hard.
Right. But it's...
Us included.
Yeah. Yeah. We like ourselves a lot. And we don't... It's like, so you're uncomfortable in this moment and, or I was uncomfortable in a certain moment. And so therefore, it's like, it's like little kids are like this, right? I mean, if you attempt to become a self-actualized person and you're climbing up the rung of like self-awareness and getting beyond yourself, it's like, okay, for a little kid, it's like, I'm your best friend. Now I don't like you. I hate you. It's like, well, what changed? It's like, you didn't give me the cup of juice that I asked for.
Yeah, it's exactly that.
So God is not an ATM machine. It's not like, just give me what I want. There's a huge system. One of the 16th century great philosophers of Judaism named Rabbi Ishayahu Horowitz, Rabbi Isaiah Horowitz, known affectionately by the name of his work, the Shla, explained there's this rabbinic tradition that before God created this world, he was building and destroying worlds. Building and destroying, building and destroying. So it's like he was trying trial and error, like what was. So the Shla says that anything that we're being told about God's behavior is for us, of course, because he wasn't making mistakes. And in fact, what is being communicated in that rabbinic tradition is that one of those earlier worlds is a world where everything is kind of like perfect, where there's no struggle. And that needed to be scrapped. It's like you look at the world and you say, well, this is the perfect world. Like, this is the one that we went with. This was the model.
Right.
This was the, But we need to know that, this is the modle.
And there's nothing we can do about it.
Well, and it's not just that, and it's great. It's a great model. It works because you occasionally need resistance you need to expose yourself to fears and or be exposed to these things, not so that you could say like, well, those things aren't scary, but so that you can say like, oh, I'm actually quite a bit stronger than I thought I was. And so challenges in life are opportunities to ask yourself, how strong am I? How and what can I do with this? How can I use this? Like, this is the cards now. what do I do with it? So, I mean,
someone said to me once, who did have a lot of survivors in his family from the Holocaust, older guy in London. He said it in a very black and white way. Whether one would agree with it or not, I don't know, but this was his view. He said it was very simple with the Holocaust. Those that went in with faith, their faith became stronger. Those that went in shaky either lost it or just became wrecks. Mm-hmm. Whether they survived or not, whether they made it out or not. So in other words, it was all about the attitude before it started. It's a harsh black and white way of looking at it. I'm not sure if I agree or disagree. I don't think humans are that black and white. Yeah. I think there were probably people in the Holocaust that discovered Hashem. And I think there were probably people that were unbelievably strong, or they thought they were, who were finished off. I don't know.
I have an odd number of friends who actually have gotten sick. Bizarrely.
No more, please.
No more, please. Bizarrely, my older brother had a totally different type of lymphoma. There's like thousands of kinds, and they're not genetically linked. So what? My mother, 2 sons.
Well, that's one of the first things I said to you. But I felt for your mum and your dad.
Yeah.
Seconds, because I knew about your brother.
Said. You know what my mother said to me? I think this was, if I had to say the hard, and mind you, I spent 18 days in a hospital. On one of the things was like some sort of like it had to do with rabbits. I don't know what it was. It was some sort of like they take like some sort of rabbit extract, mix it with a bunch of poison, and put it in your body. It's like, wow, what are we going to look at? 100 years ago, we're going to look back and be like, what were we thinking?
I know. That's one of the miracles of medicine. I know.
Well, it's gotten a lot better actually, even from the time that my brother was shortly ill, and Baruch Hashem is better. To now, like to my experience a year ago now, the medicine has improved incredibly.
Wow, even within a year?
Yeah. No, not probably 4 or 5 years.
Right. Oh, I see.
About a year ago when I was sick.
Oh, I see.
Anyway, the hardest part, and there were some hard parts, was the first time that we pulled up to the hospital near where we live.
Right.
And my mother, under her breath, said, "I never thought I'd see this place again." And I was like, "Oh no, that is the worst thing I've ever heard,"
Wow.
And that was really hard. That was really, really challenging to be,
the vehicle
for that feeling. There were a number of similar scenarios that involved my wife. My father's like, a rock like that.
Right.
But those were the hardest things when it involved, other people, me being the source of their pain in that way. But even in those moments of pain, not myself, but sharing that pain together is a pretty remarkable thing. So anyway, I have too many people that I know who have been sick. I have a number of friends, some who, thank God, got better, and some who didn't, which is part of when I say, I know it's going to be okay. I say that with a full awareness of the fact that I have people that I love dearly who are still living with the pain of loss. But I would still say, and they would say, and it's going to be okay. It is okay. Not that it's okay that happened, and that we understand it, but that going back to that Nasa finish, like we are on the inside and things look really messy, but on the outside things are okay. And that's a really hard thing. So I was talking to one of my friends on Tuesday, who is a survivor. And I said to him that we were just talking about this sick club, double entendre. It's a sick and twisted, and also sick people who were sick. Club of people who have been through this. Families, both those who survived and those who didn't. And I said to him, you know what the craziest thing of the whole story was, you come to a place where there is nobody else in the world except for you and Hashem. There's no, because no one can help you. And people put in hours of time and hours of like medical helping, getting our family like settled.
Counseling, schools, kids,
all of it,
everything.
Food being dropped off.
Can imagine.
Just everything you could imagine, which is, that speaks volumes for our community. I told one of the nurses, she's like, so where are you living? I was like, well, we have this house. Like, well, like, don't you guys live in Israel? It's like, yeah, we do. Like, all our stuff's there. It's like, so, it's like, well, this person brought a couch and this person brought right. She's like, what? I said, yeah, I'm like, people you know? I was like, no, people I don't know.
I'd like to say this is the special thing about the Jewish people, but it's not special only to us. Non-Jewish people do these things. Very important to say, but our role.
There were plenty of non-Jewish angels in this story.
Undoubtedly. But our underlying role in the world from the minute this Jewish project began is to say to the world, this is how we all need to behave.
Right.
There has to be a benchmark. We're not the best people. We're the chosen people, and what we're chosen for is a special mission for all of humanity. But we're not better. What would be better? Or what do you think this is all about? The Jews are going to win. The Jews run the world. They always ran the world. That book the Protocols of, what was it called? Whatever it's called, of Zion. I've forgotten the name.
The Protocols of the Elders.
Of the Elders of Zion. The Jews run the world. Wait a minute. The only thing we're trying to run here on a deep level from our responsibility and our ambassadorship from the one that created it is to say, this is how the world is best to be. The best advice the Creator is giving, going back to that thing of advice, is that everyone does this.
Right. And we mess up sometimes, and we're not always the best ambassadors.
We mess up, and we're held to a higher standard.
Right.
And so therefore we're singled out more. I think that shows the strength in the relationship. We're still in love with him. He's definitely still in love with us. Although sometimes I understand it's like hard to see sometimes, Hashem, but then relating it to your situation.
Yeah, so with all of that help, right? Like all of that. And at the end of the day, it's like people have poured all this time, effort, and energy into helping you. And at the end of the day, they still have their families and their things that they need to do. And it's like, there's only you and Hashem. The only one who is there with you is you and Hashem. And listen to what happened to me when I had this kind of like, it's like someone dropped off the cookies or the dinner and took care of our kids. But then they went back to their thing, and we're still sitting there in shambles, like trying to figure it out from the inside with the blood on the doorposts. And then I had this crazy realization, which I probably could have written a nice essay about, with footnotes and everything. But, and it was all of a sudden I had this realization that Hashem being present there and me being present there, I know my own experience. I'm experiencing this and I can't unplug from it. Everyone else can help out but they're not having that experience. And then I started to say, that's where I started getting this idea of, well, how is this experience for my wife? It's actually just her and Hashem, and my mother and Hashem, my father and Hashem. And then because again, explorer of wisdom, and a seeker of meaning, and trying to think. And I started to think I wonder, and this is what I said to my friend yesterday, I said I wonder if anybody was at my wedding except for me and Hashem, the highest moment. And of course, I had hundreds of friends and to a degree. And then I said, I wonder if I was ever at anyone's wedding to like really be there with them, you know? And then I said, I wonder if I was at Rena's wedding, like my wife, like, because we have this, we live our own senses, going back to Professor Dawkins. We live with our own brain and our own senses. And I believe I actually wrote this to the person who I just recently got in touch with, the person who gave me their bone marrow, my donor. I won't say his name because I don't, but I would love to. You know, if I would have asked him before, I would have said it. You know, it deserves to be said. But I wrote him a letter afterwards, quoting Einstein, who said that the major goal of all of religion is to get past the delusion that we are all that there is. That like my perception of things and how I want them to be is what it's all about. And so the greatest gift of all of this was this feeling of, by knowing that it was just me and Hashem and that nobody else could experience that, I started to say, well, maybe you can do that also for other people. You can never fully do it, you know, but to be there to be there with another person to the best of your ability, at least in the ways that you can be when you're actually with them.
Right.
And to be able to stop for a second. I mean, someone's watching this right now. And, you know, for them for a second to say like, well, what did it feel like to be sitting in this seat right now, or for you to be sitting there, and for me to do that for you, and all of that being present for the other person. The whole world is all about like mindfulness and presence, but there's a certain ability to, when you're like hovering between body and not body, when you're like in that state, and you, which I never got to a state where I was like, thank God, I was never in any danger, mortal danger, at least not imminent. But you're just in that space where it's just you and Hashem, and you recognize what that feels like to like totally there. Then you can apply that elsewhere. And as a teacher, and as a father, and as a husband, that has probably been the greatest lesson, the greatest gift of the whole thing. To attempt to get out of your own thing, your own five senses, and how you're viewing that situation in the moment, and stop judging it from your own thing, and really go there to be with that other person.
And that's anything but you're just the brain.
Yeah.
So that's where it takes Professor Dawkins' idea, and we say, listen, true, but there's more. And this is what you're talking about. There's more, and it's not just physical matter. This is what you're saying to me now. It's not chemistry. It's not brain chemistry. I imagine some people will argue. No, they can't argue because when you're better and the chemicals have slowed down or readjusted it still lives with you. Amen. It still lives with you because it becomes now a lifestyle. It becomes a behavior. It becomes a choice. How am I going to be with others? And what you're saying is you've got to such a level, such a place with you and Hashem that you're like, I now need to take that and apply it to me and others.
Correct.
Almost like you want to try and intensify the personal relationship with others, like it was intensified between you and Hashem.
Yeah.
So it's an amazing thing.
You know those they're like diagrams where you take an essay and you put it into some program, and it'll pull out like what are the major words that are like, I forget what they're called, a word garden, something like that.
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
It's like it blows up the word, you know.
Yeah.
Relationship, I think, is probably, I mean, that's what we've touched on in a number of places, and I think that I've known you for a long time. I feel like that's an important piece of how you're living your life, relationships with other people, and
massive.
And you know, the importance of not betraying other people and being true to the relationship, even when it's hard. And so that doesn't apply any less to a relationship, whether you understand it or not, between you and Hashem.
Right. Was there any moments of despair? The reason I ask that is because when I first became religious and I got into learning about the Klausenberger Rebbe, again, for those who don't know, a famous super rabbi who ran a Hungarian community called in Klausenberg, and who lost 11 children and his wife in the Holocaust and whatever. I connected very quickly to that story for some reason when I first became religious. And as a filmmaker, I was intent from the very beginning. I have to do something with filmmaking for this man. I mean, he obviously, he survived. He built this incredible hospital and community in Netanya in Israel, and many, many more things.
Well, think about that for a second. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's where did he get that idea of like being there for people in that way? It's what we were just talking about.
That's what touched me most.
Yeah.
And the story specifically of the hospital, Laniado, of him making a commitment after being shot on the death march by a Nazi and basically bleeding to death, creating his own tourniquet, stopping the bleeding. And in that moment of, you're talking a death march, it's him and Hashem.
Yeah.
In that moment of bleeding, I'm not sure if it's a neder, a vow. It's never been clear, but he spoke about, he said the words, in that moment, I said to Hashem, if I survive this, I will create a medical center, a hospital, somewhere. I heard from somewhere, he said in Israel, which hadn't even been born yet. Mm-hmm. This was 1944.
Yeah.
So we're 4 years away from the state of Israel. But he said, I'm going to build a hospital that will serve all of humanity, not just Jews, all of humanity, and the doors will always be open, and it will be run in a Jewish way, and et cetera, et cetera. That hospital exists. That's in Netanya.
Yeah.
And it serves 400,000 plus people.
I've seen it.
And it serves Palestinians.
Yeah.
And it serves Arabs. And it serves people from abroad. And blah, blah, and etc. So why am I saying that now? As much as I can talk about the Klausenberger Rebbe forever. But when I spoke to the chairman of Laniado at the time, whenever it was, 2003, 4, can't remember. And I said, I want to make a film, and we put a treatment together, me and my former business partner, and we put a treatment together. And he turned to me in this meeting, and he just said to me, how would you feel if I said to you that there were moments of immense despair that the Klausenberger went through in Auschwitz, in Dachau, on the Death March, in the Waldorf, I can't even remember the name, the forest that he was in, and being that I would say spiritually more immature there, I think I couldn't really deal with the questions. I just thought the Klausenberger Rebbe was such a hero. Mm-hmm. But the truth is that I expected there to be despair, but it's not the despair, it's what you do with the despair next. So my question to you is, were there moments where you felt, and I'm not talking about that the medication created, moments of pangs of despair, and then your reaction was to gather your thoughts and to bring everything that you had created of yourself in your mind and who you've become, your attitude, your approach to life, your emunah, your faith. Is that what happened? Did you feel despair at times? Or are you that superhero?
Yes, but the answer is no, and I wasn't a superhero.
Great. Moving swiftly on.
On to the next. No, I don't think that I felt despair. Again, we discovered the illness. I had some inflamed lymph nodes, and I did a biopsy or two, got a diagnosis, had a clear plan of action, followed it. So that may be unusual, there weren't too many bumps in the road. There was a small, after I had the 6 rounds of chemo, thought I would go straight into transplant, but there was some need for some other medication first.
There was never a thought that something along the way might go wrong?
I mean, every second there's
that's what I'm talking about.
Everything could, there was that, I always had that,
But it didn't lead you, it didn't create pangs of despair or worry? You were worried at any point?
Well, I mean, everything could go wrong right now. Like, you know,
Right.
we could check and see that you forgot to press record, you know.
Don't say that.
There's always, I mean, and I think that's part of it. I think you're silly, and anybody who's listening to this and is like, this guy is out of control, he's delusional, you know, like, no, it's I'm aware of how dangerous, you know, being alive is, and how in any second all of it could fall apart. But what choice do you have other than, meaning that's in a certain sense, sitting here right now in this studio, and being, you know, that goes back to the coin in the pocket thing. Like, there's not a difference between everything not being perfect, and the degree of how not perfect it is. You know, if it's either everything is perfect or it's not. And if you have a system of what to do with that, if you could say, well, yeah, I mean, this could go really bad, but I am going to do everything that I can to make sure that it's not going to be, as, you know, there's a certain level of nisayon. I'm being tested. And if I play this right, no matter how it goes, you win. I win. Because if you allow that to say, well, this is hard and uncomfortable, and I despair, even if you fail by the regular measures, I want to be clear, like, even if you fail by the regular measure, the fact that you're willing to say, okay, well, in relationships, like, you fail sometimes. And that's okay. But willing to say, like, okay, I never felt despair.
Right.
I never felt,
right.
Yeah, that bothered my wife a lot also.
I'm sure.
Yeah.